How we doing, folks? Your host Moose here on the Pitt Panthers Football Network as we wrap up Week 7 around the NCAA for you guys. The Pitt Panthers coming off a victory over Wake Forest. They get off the snide. Big victory, huge game for the rushing attack finally. Todd Sibley led the way with 150 yards on the ground on 20 carries. CJ London also had over 100 yards as well. 3 rushing touchdowns from the pair of them. Just a great game overall for the Panthers. They also forced 4 turnovers, 3 forced fumbles, or fumbles recovered, I should say, and an interception. So just an incredible day all around for the Panthers. 253 total rushing yards, 154 yards passing, but 3 interceptions. So a bit of a tough day there. Panthers much better at converting on third downs in Wake. They held them off from converting twice on fourth down. The one area the Panthers could do a little bit better on, of course, is in the red zone. But just a great performance overall for the team. Huge to get the rushing attack going because it's really been very hit or miss and inconsistent so far this year, and seeing that be successful was really a key to victory for the Panthers here in this game. Tough day for Kenny Pickett, like we mentioned, sacked 4 times, 3 interceptions, and he had a fumble as well. He had all 4 of the Pitt Panthers turnovers, but they picked it up with the rushing attack. CJ London, 112 yards on just 12 carries. Todd Sibley, 150 yards on 20 carries. London was probably a bit more explosive. He had 2 carries with 20 or more yards, and Sibley really just had that big 69-yard carry that was huge. Maurice French did have 5 catches. Cam Porter had 7 pancakes, probably one of the single best games I've ever seen for an offensive lineman. It was so good that I was literally pointing out his blocks in the game recap video, which usually I do my best to point out offensive linemen, but usually you're looking at the skill guys or the defensive players and stuff like that. But he had such a good game that we were able to literally pick all of that out. It was incredible. Big game for the defense, of course. 3 different guys recovered fumbles. Jazzy Stalker had an interception. Really just a spectacular day overall. Jay Bump made a couple of field goals. Fox had a nice game punting the ball. It was really a great game overall. We held Wake Forest to just 150 yards passing and only 268 yards of total offense. So really just a fantastic defensive day for us overall, after Louisville had kind of had their way with us offensively, especially late in the game passing the ball. So it was nice to take a team that had been averaging 260 or so passing yards a game and really shut them down to absolutely nothing. It was a great game overall. We did exactly what we needed to do, pressured the quarterback. We had, I think, 6 sacks. I want to say 6 or 7 sacks, so just a great game overall. And where it was really a great game for us ended up being in the recruiting field. 5 commits immediately following this game. All the guys that were visiting committed on the spot. Bill Butler, Scott Whaley, Ryan Jacobs, Chad Powell, Brian Fisher, all committed. 3 guys that more than likely will be playing at cornerback for us. Bill Butler, Brian Fisher, and Scott Whaley all projected to probably play at cornerback, though Butler and Whaley could both play at receiver and not miss a beat. Chad Powell, a receiver, and Ryan Jacobs, a defensive tackle. We do miss out on cornerback Blake Marks. The Florida product chose Army over us, but he was really a secondary option for us anyway, so we do miss on him. He ended up being a 68 overall player. Remember, I don't scout until after people sign somewhere, so I don't know actually how good they are until after we sign them. So we'll find out. Jacobs still projected as a 77 overall. Good tackling, good hit power. Looks like a power guy. He's a tank in the middle of the field. Chad Powell projected as a 76 overall. He is 6'3", so he's got good size, but really no speed. 83 overall. His catching is solid. Catching traffic is okay. His route running is actually very polished already, so he's going to be a guy that can probably play, as a number 2 or 3 receiver, I think, as he progresses for us. He doesn't have the explosiveness to be a deep threat really for us despite his size. Scott Whaley, 73 overall projected athlete, but the thing with Whaley, he is a gem. 5 overall growth when we scouted him. Look at that. He goes up to 78 overall, 90 speed, and where he's really key, 87 man coverage, 87 zone coverage, and he has 79 catching. He's going to be an incredible cover corner for us. I think he could start on the outside from day one. He may be a high enough overall that he's going to be a day 1 starter for us. Brian Fisher, when we scout him, he does have explosive speed, 95 speed already, but he does drop down to 77 overall. His man coverage only 83. His zone's a little bit better. With his speed, he could probably be a good nickel corner for us, but he's going to need a little bit of growth, I think, to fill into that role, but I love how fast he is. Bill Butler, He's another guy. He was 79 overall projected, number 2 athlete in the country, 5-star. Him and Chad Powell were both 5 stars. Everybody else that we signed were 4 stars. But Butler, projected as 79, ends up only as 77. 93 speed, which is good though, but his man coverage is only 82. So I want him to be a cover corner, but he may need to not be a starter right away just because his man coverage isn't as high as we'd like it to be. But you can see he's got good catching as well, good carrying. He could be a player that could play somewhere, receiver or running back somewhere else if we needed him to, a la a Jay Keys, 2-possession star. But as it is, I think he's definitely going to fit into somewhere in the defensive backfield when it all shakes out. But 5 huge signing for us. Like I mentioned, a couple of 5-stars in Powell and Butler, and I'm really excited about what Scott Whaley can provide to us. I think he's might be the gem of the bunch when we end up looking at our entire recruiting class. But huge for us over the weekend around the ACC. Clemson, you can see, ended up holding off a late Louisville rally to win 42-33. Georgia Tech knocked off then unbeaten Virginia Tech, who we will be playing this week. So rather than facing a top 10 Virginia Tech, we'll be facing a Virginia Tech that's coming off their first loss of the season after a huge upset by Lane Kiffin and Georgia Tech. Don't forget he's there. Virginia blows out an FCS school 56-6. Miami dominates Notre Dame 52-17. Huge win for the Hurricanes there to really bounce up their resume. I think they still only have one loss at this time. NC State blows out Syracuse, and North Carolina an easy 42-27 victory over Boston College. So the cream of the crop of the ACC looking to impose their will on the other teams right now. Oklahoma State stays unbeaten with a victory over Texas Tech. Stanford ends up knocking off Washington. So the Huskies, after winning the national championship with an incredible 15-0 season last year, they have 3 losses already this season. They're probably going to drop out of the top 25 rankings with that loss as they go to 3-3. Oklahoma beats Cal. Penn State just escapes Nebraska 28-26. They were on upset alert there, but they stay unbeaten with that victory. Georgia puts up a 50-burger on Missouri, 59-31 victory there. UAB stays unbeaten, goes to 5-0 with a victory over North Texas. Houston is up to 6-0 as they blow out USF 56-14. USF was unbeaten just 2 weeks ago. Losses to Bama and Houston now. LSU, easy 38-16 win over BYU. Like we saw before, NC State 41-17 over Syracuse. Auburn stays unbeaten with an easy 31-6 victory over a very talented but underachieving Ole Miss team. They're A+ overall, but 3-3 now. Cincinnati goes to 4-1 with a win over Navy. Arkansas, impressive, a 50-burger on Colorado. They're 55-31, so they're 7-0 now, I think. They haven't even had a bye yet this year, so they are just incredible right now. Really, really impressive season from them. Michigan State over Purdue, Ohio State over Illinois, and Bama over a winless Kentucky team right now who's really struggling with Jamar Smith at quarterback, who actually led LSU to the playoff last season. He transferred to Kentucky with Burrow going to LSU, and he's been on a struggling Kentucky team, that's for sure. William White for Buffalo ends up with a 2-sack, interception, 15-tackle performance in a win over Toledo. Alex Delton, 7 touchdowns and 400 yards or 399 yards in a victory over Baylor for Kansas State. Good performance from him. Evan Sheriffs in the win over Notre Dame put up a 5-touchdown, almost 400-yard passing performance, while Shaheem Cullen had 2 sacks, forced a fumble, and a pick to go along with 6 tackles for a loss. Incredible performance in spite of the loss for Syracuse to NC State. Joe Burrow still top of the Heisman leaderboard. Ty Story, though, leading Arkansas to the 7-0 unbeaten start. 6 touchdowns, almost 400 yards in his performance in the victory over Colorado. Puts him up to number 2 in the Heisman race. Kelly Bryant drops down to 3. It's amazing. He dropped to 3 in a 5-touchdown performance. That's how good Ty Story and Joe Burrow have been. B.J. Emmons, 4th in the race, and Jacob Eason from Georgia, 6-touchdown performance, gets him into the Heisman conversation as well. You can see it's basically just players from all the top teams around the country right now. Bama's still at number 1. Really not a lot of changes in the top 10 until you get down to the 7 spot with Notre Dame losing. They're going to drop out of the top 10. Texas is up to 7. Houston and NC State, both unbeatens, jump into the top 10 for the first time this year. Oklahoma, Clemson still at 11. Oklahoma State and Arkansas unbeaten as well, so they're up to 12 and 13 respectively. Georgia at 14. Virginia Tech also dropped out of the top 10 because of their loss, so they're going to drop all the way back behind Notre Dame here, who's 16. Virginia Tech will drop all the way to 17 as they set up a matchup with Pitt this week. Stanford up to 18. Miami at 5-1's up to 19. Pitt is at 20. 4-2, so your Pitt Panthers into the top 20 yet again after their victory over Wake. Unbeaten UAB's 21. Georgia Tech's big win over Virginia Tech actually gets them into the rankings at 23. Tennessee's 24, and Florida at 25 as they come back into the top 25 polls. Washington just drops out, so your national champions or defending national champions definitely not going to be doing that this season as they're out of the top 25 entirely. This week around the ACC, not a ton of games, a few teams on byes, but otherwise it's basically all ACC play. Pitt, Virginia Tech, Syracuse, Duke, Georgia Tech, Virginia, Louisville, Boston College, NC and Miami, and NC State and Florida State. So NC State at number 9 replaces then unbeaten Virginia Tech, who was number 9 last week in a big game. Georgia Tech into the rankings for the first time, but they are playing a very good UVA school who's been excellent at scoring points and also has a very strong defense, so that should be a good game there. Michigan State taking on Wisconsin in a tough Big Ten battle. Spartans projected to win there. And the game of the week has to be Arkansas, unbeaten 7-0. This is their first real test to see if their number 5 offense is for real. They're taking on number 1 Bama. Number 21 and unbeaten UAB will take on Rice, who is 4-1, and remember, Rice beat Florida earlier in the season, so they are a good team. That should be interesting to see if UAB can stay unbeaten there. West Virginia will take on unbeaten Oklahoma State in Stillwater. Should be a good matchup there. Number 4 passing offense for West Virginia will be playing in that game. Ranked battle, rivalry matchup, Stanford, Notre Dame, a game that happens pretty much every season. Should be a fun one to watch there. And Miami taking on UNC, of course, another big ACC matchup as Miami looks to get back to the ACC title game where they were 2 seasons ago. Pitt, though, and Virginia Tech, Miami's 2 real main contenders for the ACC Coastal Division title. Virginia Tech was 3-0 in conference already. They did lose last week. And really, I mean, they've kind of overachieved this season. They were 5-0, and they now have 1 loss, but overall, they haven't been great. 41st ranked defense, 46th ranked offense. They don't score a ton of points. They don't cause a ton of turnovers. They just seem to be winning games, contrasting with the Pitt defense, who's number 4 in the country. Pitt's forced a lot of turnovers. If they can protect the ball themselves and keep that rushing attack going against Virginia Tech rush defense that's been very poor this season, number 74 in the country, Pitt should, give Virginia Tech a game, even though it's been known that it's tough to play Virginia Tech at Lane Stadium, with Enter Sandman and everything they have going. Led by Jack Click offensively, 14 passing touchdowns against just 4 interceptions. Divine Diablo, their top receiver, and McLeese, their big running back, at nearly 100 yards a game. If we look at that Virginia Tech schedule, like I mentioned, though, big win against a Wisconsin team that isn't as good as most people think. They're only 3-2 this season, although they did almost beat Ohio State, but then otherwise, Florida State, who stinks, Old Dominion's not great, Syracuse, and then they did beat Miami, who's been very good this season, but then lost to Georgia Tech. So it's tough to say what you have with this Virginia Tech team that you're playing against. The big story for the Panthers, Kenny Pickett needs to limit his turnovers. 4 turnovers last game, 2 in the game against Louisville the day before, so 6 turnovers in the last 2 contests. He needs to hold the ball, and the Panthers will be okay. Big injury, though, for Pitt. Kaiser Artis Scott, their nickel corner, 89 overall, as a true junior, the Rockville, Maryland product, will be out for 3 weeks at least with a torn pectoral muscle, so that's a tough loss for the Panthers. But on the bright side, one of the guys he may have been covering, Denmark for Virginia Tech, will be out of this contest as well due to an injury. So Virginia Tech, already fairly thin at receiver, will be missing another guy. What you'll notice about Virginia Tech, good solid team. They did get a transfer this offseason. A.J. Turner, the senior halfback graduate transfer, was buried on the South Carolina depth chart. So he transferred over to Virginia Tech, so it gives them plenty of depth at running back. Jack Click's been good for them as a quarterback as well. He doesn't have a ton of great ability, but he's been good with the football so far this year, and does have 14 touchdowns, like I mentioned, against just 4 interceptions. But nice 1-2 punch for Virginia Tech rushing the football. When these 2 guys graduate, though, they'll be very, very thin at running back. But McLeese and Turner are a nice 1-2 punch. Like I mentioned, A.J. Turner did transfer over from South Carolina, and he's been good for them right now. 95 yards on the ground for McLeese, 66 yards on the ground for A.J. Turner. So they've been a really nice 1-2 punch to allow Virginia Tech to control the game on the ground and control the battle there. Divine Diablo, of course, is their top receiver. They do have Ryan Winston, who's a good redshirt sophomore, solid player out of Maryland. They are going to be missing Denmark, though, which is a big loss because once you get behind Winston, they do have the speed burner, Jakari Thomas, 98 speed, which is incredible to see that on a player. But beyond that, I mean, they have Harris, they have Murphy. Not a ton of really outstanding talent there. They do have 2 really good tight ends, though, so when they can use them in 2 tight end sets, they'll be very good. Xavier Burke and Chris Cunningham, both very solid players there. They have a strong left side of their offensive line, you see 90, 85, 85. But when you look at them at right guard, Boone, only 75 overall as a sophomore. Jeff Gibson, 74 overall, the redshirt junior. So that should be good news for Panthers defensive end Sean Wolfgang, who'll be playing on that side of the field, as well as defensive tackle Keyshawn Camp to try and get after the quarterback from that side of the field. Defensive line, though, for Virginia Tech, very, very solid. They got Fullwood, they have Hill, a couple of really good players. Tim Settle in the middle is an absolute man mountain, 340 pounds, just an absolute tank. They have George and Walker as well, Steve Walker, and George, look at him, true junior, 88 overall. So that's a fantastic player already. He's gone through 2 growth cycles. He's already up to 88 overall. He'll probably be in the NFL next year, you'd expect. Linebacker is probably the one area where Virginia Tech is not very good. So if we can get some of our tight ends, maybe our running backs, or even our if we get them to run a 4-3 set and have 3 receivers on the field, we can get some of our receivers into space or our backfield mates into space against their linebackers. I think that could be very, very productive for us offensively. They're not great at corner either. They have Rogers, of course. Tyree Rogers, a fantastic player, 91 overall impact player at corner. But beyond that, they got James Brown. I feel good. Who is a very good player. Jacque Allen, of course, as their free safety, 94 overall, but not a ton of depth in their secondary as well. You can see they've got a couple really good starters who are seniors, but beyond that, not a ton of depth. Javon Quillen, redshirt junior, only 83 overall, starting at strong safety. So I think if we can, maybe just protect very well, this could be a game for Kenny Pickett to really rebound and do well passing the football, just because of the opposition that presents itself against us. So as always, guys, thank you so much for watching. Let me know in the comments who's going to win that Arkansas-Alabama huge matchup that's coming up this week. Who's going to win your Pitt Panthers taking on Virginia Tech? What's the final score going to be? What do you expect to happen? Hail to Pitt. We'll see you in the game. Take care. See you soon. Bye-bye.